When 14-year-old Frank Gervasi vanished from her quiet suburban home in East Patchogue, New York, on a chilly December evening, the world her family once knew was torn apart in an instant. The streets of their peaceful neighborhood, lined with snow-dusted trees and the warm glow of holiday lights, suddenly felt cold and unfamiliar. She had been an ordinary teenager, a bright-spirited girl with a love for drawing and a contagious smile that brought joy to everyone around her. Her disappearance was anything but ordinary. It was just after 5 p.m. on December 8, 2024, when Frank stepped out of her home, barefoot and jacketless, intending to retrieve something from the family truck. The simplicity of her errand was a cruel irony, for within moments, she vanished without a trace. A dark-colored Honda pulled up to the curb, its engine barely audible in the crisp air, and within seconds, Frank was gone. No shouts, no struggle, just the faint sound of a car door closing and the eerie silence that followed. Her father, Frank Gervasi, immediately sprang into action. To him, the seconds that passed without her return felt like hours, and the hours stretched into an unbearable eternity. He searched the yard, called her name into the encroaching darkness, and then dialed 911 when his voice yielded no reply. Panic rippled through the neighborhood as friends and neighbors joined the search. Flyers were printed, social media posts shared, and search parties organized, but the clues were scarce and the answers were elusive. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the hope of finding Frank safe began to waver. The family, once bound by laughter and shared traditions, now existed in a state of constant worry. Frank, however, refused to falter. He increased the reward for information leading to her safe return to $15,000, plastered her face on posters across town, and worked tirelessly with law enforcement and private investigators. But behind the scenes, questions lingered and tensions grew. Who had taken Frank? Was she still alive? And what could drive someone to commit such a devastating act? The answers would come, but not before the family was tested in ways they could never have imagined. A cryptic phone call on January 3, 2025 changed everything. An anonymous voice on the other end of the line whispered a location: an abandoned boat docked in Islip. The details were scarce, the voice unnervingly calm, but it was enough. Frank didn't hesitate. Driven by equal parts desperation and hope, he made his way to the dock, his heart pounding with every step. What he found aboard that boat would bring his daughter home, but leave a trail of questions and heartbreak in its wake. And as the truth of Frank's disappearance unfolded, it became clear that this story was far from over. A community's trust shattered, a family's bond tested, and a father's determination pushed to its limits, all centered around the fragile hope of bringing Frank back to safety. The Gervasi family lived in Pinebrook, a serene suburban neighborhood in East Patchogue, New York, where the sound of children playing and neighbors exchanging pleasantries filled the air. The tight-knit community was the kind of place where doors were left unlocked and everyone knew each other by name. For years, it seemed like nothing bad could ever happen here, until the unthinkable shattered that illusion. Frank Gervasi was a hard-working father and a pillar of the community, known for his unyielding dedication to his family. His wife, Angela, shared his devotion, and together they had raised their 3 children in a home filled with love and laughter. Their youngest daughter, Frank, was the heart of the household. At just 14 years old, she was a bright, creative, and spirited young girl. She had a love for drawing that seemed to transport her to another world, her sketches often reflecting her vivid imagination and the happiness she radiated. Whether she was giggling with her friends at the local park or perfecting her art, Frank had a magnetic energy that drew people to her. December 8, 2024 was a day like any other. The warm afternoon sun illuminated the streets of Pinebrook as Frank walked home from school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and her thoughts likely drifting to plans for the weekend. She was known to follow the same route every day, a short 15-minute walk that took her past familiar houses and friendly faces. But on that day, Frank didn't make it home. Angela began to worry when her daughter hadn't arrived by 4:30 p.m., knowing that Frank was never late without letting her know. By 5 p.m., that worry had turned into panic. Frank, calm but determined, retraced her usual route, calling her name and asking neighbors if they had seen her. One neighbor recalled seeing her near the corner of Maple Drive, but nothing beyond that. The police were called shortly after, and the search began in earnest. The first few hours were frantic, with family and friends scouring the neighborhood, calling her phone and checking every possible location she could have gone. Her phone, however, went straight to voicemail, and her social media accounts showed no signs of recent activity. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. The initial investigation turned up little. There were no signs of a struggle, no suspicious witnesses, and no immediate leads. Police reviewed security footage from nearby homes, but the grainy images offered no concrete answers. However, one chilling detail emerged. A dark-colored Honda had been seen idling near the corner where MRI was last spotted. The car's license plate was obscured, and its purpose for being there was unknown. It was a small clue, but one that would haunt the investigation in the weeks to come. Frank and Angela could barely sleep in the days following MRA's disappearance. Their home, once filled with warmth and joy, now felt cold and empty. Frank refused to sit idly by. He began organizing search parties, distributing flyers, and working closely with law enforcement. His determination was unwavering, but the lack of progress was crushing. As days turned into weeks, the hope of finding MRA alive began to waver. The community rallied behind the Gervasis, offering prayers, resources, and unwavering support, but behind the scenes, the family was grappling with unimaginable despair. Frank, however, was relentless. He increased the reward for information to $15,000, plastering MRA's photo across the town and beyond, hoping to reach someone who might know something, anything. What no one could see, hidden beneath the surface of this tragedy, were the shadows of deeper truths waiting to be uncovered. The events that followed would test the limits of Frank's resolve and challenge everything the family thought they knew about safety, justice, and the lengths one would go to for love. Little did anyone know, this case would uncover hidden truths and test the limits of a father's determination. The timeline of MRA Gervasi's disappearance began to take shape as investigators pieced together the events of December 8, 2024. It started as a typical day in Pine Brook, with clear skies and the familiar hum of suburban life. MRA had left school around 3:15 p.m., chatting with her friends as they parted ways at the usual corner. Her best friend, Mia, recalled waving goodbye and watching MRA turn onto Maple Drive, her backpack bouncing lightly as she walked. It was the last time anyone saw her. By 3:45 p.m., MRA should have been home. When Angela realized her daughter hadn't arrived by 4, she immediately called her. The phone rang once before going to voicemail, a detail that would later haunt her. Frank, noticing Angela's growing panic, grabbed his keys and set out to retrace MRA's route. He called her name as he walked, his voice growing more desperate with each passing minute. He knocked on neighbors' doors, checked the park where she often stopped to sketch, and searched the surrounding streets, but there was no sign of her. By 5:30 p.m., Frank and Angela contacted the police. The authorities quickly mobilized, understanding the critical window of time in missing persons cases. Officers canvassed the area, speaking to residents, while search teams combed through nearby parks and wooded areas. Flyers with MRA's photo and description were distributed throughout Pine Brook in neighboring towns. MRA's disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. Parents held their children closer, and conversations turned to speculation about what could have happened. Theories ranged from an abduction by a stranger to the possibility that MRA had run away, though those who knew her dismissed the latter outright. She was happy, well-loved, and had no reason to leave. On the second day of the search, a breakthrough seemed imminent. A group of volunteers discovered MRA's backpack, abandoned in a park roughly 2 miles from her usual route home. The sight of the bright purple bag, unzipped and partially hidden beneath a bush, sent a grin through everyone involved. Inside, investigators found her sketchbook, still filled with her intricate drawings, and a few personal items. However, her phone and wallet were missing. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Had she been taken there, or had the bag been planted to mislead searchers? The backpack reignited the search efforts, with police focusing on the park and its surrounding areas. Drones and K-9 units were deployed, scouring every inch of the dense terrain. Witnesses who frequented the park were interviewed, but none could provide solid leads. One woman reported seeing a dark-colored Honda circling the area on the day Emery went missing. the same car spotted earlier on Maple Drive. The car's connection to her disappearance became a central focus, but without a license plate or clear description of the driver, it was a frustratingly vague lead. As days turned into weeks, the family's hope began to dim, though Frank refused to let despair take hold. He worked tirelessly, organizing candlelight vigils and expanding the search radius. His determination became a rallying cry for the community, and news outlets began covering the story more extensively. The family's pleas for information aired on local television stations, reaching a wider audience. Frank's increased reward was still on, hoping to incentivize someone to come forward. The case took a dark turn 3 weeks after Emerai's disappearance. On a quiet Sunday morning, a jogger stumbled upon an abandoned cell phone near a creek on the outskirts of town. It was water damaged, but intact enough for investigators to determine it was Emerai's. This discovery deepened the mystery. Was the phone discarded during a struggle, or had it been deliberately left to mislead authorities? As forensic teams examined the device for fingerprints or data recovery, tension within the Gervasi household grew unbearable. Each discovery brought hope, but also dread of what it might reveal. The pressure on law enforcement intensified. The case, which had already garnered statewide attention, now seemed to hinge on unraveling a series of cryptic clues that painted an incomplete and unsettling picture. Investigators combed through CCTV footage from local businesses, hoping to catch a glimpse of the dark-colored Honda. They uncovered footage of the car leaving Pine Brook around the time Emerai disappeared, but the driver remained unidentified. The breakthrough everyone hoped for came in the form of an anonymous tip. A call to the local police station reported seeing a girl matching Emerai's description entering a boat docked at a marina in Islip. The caller refused to give their name or further details, adding to the mounting sense of unease. Was this a legitimate lead or a cruel distraction? But then, a shocking discovery turned the case on its head. From the moment Frank Gervasi's disappearance was reported, law enforcement worked tirelessly to untangle the growing web of mystery surrounding her case. However, as days turned into weeks, the investigation became a frustrating maze of dead-end tips, conflicting witness accounts, and puzzling evidence. The first challenge was the lack of credible eyewitness accounts. Despite Pine Brook being a close-knit community, no one could definitively say they had seen Emerai after she left school. The dark-colored Honda captured on surveillance footage near Maple Drive was the only tangible lead, but its driver remained unidentified. Efforts to track the vehicle through traffic cameras yielded no results, leaving investigators to speculate whether it was truly connected to Emerai's disappearance or a red herring. Tips began flooding in after the family's pleas aired on local and national news outlets, but they only added to the chaos. Callers reported sightings of girls resembling Emerai in neighboring towns, abandoned buildings, and even states away. But each lead ended in disappointment. Some tips seemed outright fabricated, leading law enforcement to waste precious time chasing ghosts. Forensic analysis of Emerai's backpack and phone revealed no usable DNA or fingerprints beyond her own. Investigators hoped her phone might hold clues, but the water damage made data recovery painstakingly slow. Even when some files were salvaged, they offered no insight, just a few school assignments, photos of her artwork, and texts exchanged with friends that abruptly stopped the day she vanished. Amid these struggles, Frank Gervasi, a man unwilling to accept defeat, took matters into his own hands. He hired a team of private investigators, using his own savings and community donations to fund the effort. These investigators brought fresh perspectives to the case, conducting their own interviews and re-examining the evidence. Frank's unrelenting determination to find his daughter inspired those around him, but it also put a strain on his family. Angela, already consumed by grief, began to feel isolated as Frank immersed himself in the search, often leaving home for days at a time to follow potential leads. Then, 18 days after Emerai's disappearance, a cryptic note arrived at the Gervasi home. It was handwritten on plain paper and placed in an unmarked envelope, delivered directly to their mailbox. The note read, "She's alive, but time is running out. You'll find answers where the water meets the woods." The message was harrowingly vague, yet undeniably pointed. The phrasing, "time is running out," sent shivers down Frank's spine. Who had written it? Was it a clue from someone involved or a cruel prank exploiting the family's desperation? Law enforcement took the note seriously, dusting it for prints and analyzing the handwriting, but neither yielded immediate results. Meanwhile, Frank fixated on the phrase, "where the water meets the woods." He was convinced it referred to a park near the marina in Islip, a place he had visited during previous searches. Around the same time, investigators reviewing surveillance footage from a gas station near the park uncovered something new: a dark-colored Honda driving into the parking lot on the day MRA disappeared. The footage showed the vehicle idling near the entrance for several minutes before driving away. Though the license plate remained unreadable, the timestamp placed it within the critical window of MRA's disappearance. The discovery reignited hope, but it also raised more questions. Why would the car linger there? Was it scouting the area, or was the driver involved in MRA's abduction? Investigators canvassed the area again, showing the footage to nearby residents and business owners, but no one recognized the car or its driver. Still, the combination of the cryptic note and the footage pushed law enforcement to focus their efforts on the marina and surrounding park. As search teams returned to the area, a sense of urgency hung heavy in the air. Officers combed through the woods bordering the water, while divers searched the depths of the marina. The tension was palpable as each hour passed without results. Then, a discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. One of the search teams found a makeshift campsite hidden deep within the woods. It appeared abandoned, but bore unsettling signs of recent use. Inside the campsite were scattered items: an empty food container, a tattered blanket, and a single notebook. When investigators flipped through the pages of the notebook, they found disturbing sketches, images of a young girl who bore an eerie resemblance to MRA. What authorities found next would change everything they thought they knew about this case. From the moment MRA disappeared, Frank Gervasi became a man on a mission, refusing to let despair dictate the fate of his beloved daughter. To outsiders, his relentless drive was inspiring, but to those who knew him best, it was a reflection of a father's unyielding love and determination. Frank wasn't just seeking answers. He was fighting to bring his daughter home, no matter the cost. Frank's efforts to find MRA extended far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. He poured every ounce of energy into the search, often going days without sleep. When law enforcement resources stretched thin, he stepped in to fill the gaps, rallying the community and organizing extensive searches in and around Pinebrook. Volunteers combed through parks, abandoned properties, and wooded areas under his direction, while Frank personally contacted local businesses to review their surveillance footage. When traditional efforts stalled, Frank turned to technology. He enlisted the help of cyber investigators and data analysts, tapping into online communities and leveraging social media in ways that the police had not yet explored. He created a dedicated website to share updates on MRA's case, allowing people to submit tips anonymously. The platform gained traction, drawing attention from true crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths across the country. Frank also worked closely with private investigators, pooling his own savings and community donations to fund their efforts. His refusal to give up became a rallying cry, inspiring neighbors, friends, and even strangers to join the cause. But Frank's determination came at a price. His marriage to Angela, already strained by the stress of the situation, began to fracture under the weight of his obsession. Angela often found herself alone, consumed by worry, as Frank spent long nights chasing leads and reviewing case files. Though they shared the same goal, their grief manifested in different ways, creating a rift that neither could mend. Still, Frank pressed on. When he wasn't organizing search efforts, he was following up on every tip, no matter how improbable. He called in favors from old friends, used his connections to access information, and even hired a forensic psychologist to create a profile of the potential abductor. Frank's belief that his daughter was still alive drove him forward, even when hope seemed like a distant memory. The turning point came in the form of an anonymous email sent late one night to the website Frank had created. The message, cryptic but specific, claimed that MRA had been taken by a local trafficking ring and was being held at an undisclosed location. The sender provided scant details but suggested that further information could be uncovered by gaining the trust of certain individuals known to frequent the Islip Marina. Frank's response to the email was immediate and unconventional. Frustrated by the slow progress of the official investigation, he decided to act on the tip himself. Against the advice of law enforcement, he devised a plan to infiltrate the suspected trafficking ring. It was a risky and controversial decision, one that blurred the lines between heroism and recklessness. With the help of a trusted private investigator, Frank adopted a new persona. He posed as a man seeking illegal services, carefully crafting a backstory to gain access to the circles surrounding the marina. His covert actions required a level of composure and cunning that even he hadn't realized he possessed. Frank frequented the marina bars, striking up conversations with dock workers and shady figures who might lead him to the truth. Every interaction was a gamble, as one misstep could have exposed his identity and jeopardized Emery's safety. Weeks of undercover work yielded small but significant breakthroughs. Frank learned of a boat that was rumored to be a holding site for individuals caught in trafficking operations. The descriptions of the boat and its frequent movements matched those mentioned in the anonymous tip. Frank relayed this information to law enforcement, urging them to act swiftly. But his involvement didn't stop there. Frank continued his covert efforts, growing increasingly bold in his pursuit of answers. On one fateful night, he managed to gain access to the very boat he suspected of holding Emery. What he found aboard, personal items that matched his daughter's belongings, confirmed his worst fears and galvanized his resolve. He provided this evidence to authorities, forcing them to prioritize the raid on the vessel. The risks Frank took during his undercover work were staggering. He navigated a world of deception and danger, often alone, with no guarantee of success. Each night spent at the marina brought him closer to the truth, but also closer to potential exposure. The stakes were impossibly high. One mistake could cost not only his own life, but also Emery's. As law enforcement prepared to raid the suspected boat, Frank waited anxiously, his mind racing with thoughts of what they might find. Would Emery be there? Would she be safe? And what price had she paid for the days and weeks she had been missing? What Frank and the authorities uncovered that night would forever change the lives of everyone involved, and the revelations would send shockwaves through the community. The night of the rescue was one of intense preparation, high stakes, and immeasurable tension. After weeks of gathering intelligence and following leads, law enforcement was ready to act on the tip that Frank Gervasi had uncovered during his undercover efforts. The focus was on a large weathered boat docked at the Islip Marina, an unassuming vessel that had become the center of a dark operation. Frank, who had risked everything to bring the information forward, insisted on being present. Though initially reluctant, the authorities agreed, understanding his vital role in the investigation and his unrelenting desire to see his daughter safe. The plan was meticulously coordinated. A specialized task force, including SWAT officers and detectives, assembled near the marina under the cover of darkness. The goal was clear: secure the vessel, apprehend any suspects, and, most importantly, recover Emery. Tension hung heavy in the air as officers reviewed the operation's finer points. Frank stood nearby, his heart pounding as he struggled to keep his emotions in check. Shortly after midnight, the team moved in. Silently, they surrounded the marina, cutting off all potential escape routes. Officers boarded the boat with precision, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, they encountered resistance from two men who had been guarding the vessel. The suspects were quickly subdued and taken into custody, but the real focus was the search for Emery. The officers moved methodically through the dimly lit corridors of the boat, calling her name. Then, from a small locked cabin at the rear of the vessel, they heard a faint noise, a muffled sob. One officer called for the bolt cutters, and within moments, the lock was snapped open. There, huddled in the corner of the cramped, dimly lit room, was Emery. She was disheveled, trembling, and clearly malnourished, but she was alive. The lead officer gently approached her, speaking in a calm voice to reassure her that she was safe. Emery's wide eyes darted around the room as if she couldn't believe what was happening. It wasn't until she saw her father step into the cabin, tears streaming down his face, that she finally broke down. Frank fell to his knees, wrapping his arms around her in a moment of raw, unfiltered relief. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe now. You're coming home." The drive home that night was a blur of emotions for the Gervasi family. As Frank and Emery were reunited with Angela and the rest of the family, there was an outpouring of relief, joy, and disbelief. Emery clung tightly to her parents, as though letting go might mean losing them again. Neighbors and friends gathered outside the house to show their support, their cheers and tears reflecting the immense weight of the moment. Inside the home, however, the reality of what Emma had endured began to set in. She was physically safe, but the trauma was evident in her haunted expression and fragile demeanor. Angela prepared her a warm meal, but Emma ate little, her appetite dulled by weeks of stress and deprivation. Frank stayed by her side, holding her hand and whispering reassurances, as she recounted fragments of her ordeal to the investigators. The family's initial joy was tempered by the knowledge that the battle wasn't over. Emma's rescue was only the first step in a long journey of healing, both for her and for those who loved her. But for the first time in 26 agonizing days, there was a sense of hope, a flicker of light at the end of a dark and harrowing tunnel. As investigators began to piece together Emma's time in captivity, they quickly realized that her story was more complex and more terrifying than anyone had anticipated. What she revealed about the people who had taken her, the conditions she endured, and the events leading up to her rescue would send shockwaves through the community and beyond. But what Emma revealed about her time away would shock everyone. In the days following her rescue, Frank Gervasi began to share pieces of her harrowing story, each revelation more unsettling than the last. While she struggled to articulate the full extent of her ordeal, the fragments she did recount painted a haunting picture of her captivity. On the day of her disappearance, Emma revealed that the dark-colored Honda had pulled up beside her as she walked home. The driver, a man she didn't recognize, had rolled down the window and called out to her, asking for directions. Before she could react, a second man emerged from the back seat, grabbed her, and forced her into the car. She screamed and struggled, but their movements were swift, rehearsed, and calculated. Within minutes, they had bound her hands and blindfolded her, driving her away from the familiar streets of Pinebrook and into the unknown. Her captors, later identified as members of a small but organized trafficking ring, kept her aboard the boat at the Islet Marina for most of her captivity. They moved her occasionally to avoid detection, but the boat was her primary prison. The conditions were grim. She was kept in a locked cabin with minimal light, fed sporadically, and subjected to verbal and physical intimidation. Emma described feeling a constant sense of fear and helplessness, unsure if anyone was looking for her or if she would ever be found. Despite the trauma, Emma's resilience shone through. She recounted small acts of defiance, like secretly marking the days on the inside of the cabin wall and listening intently for conversations between her captors. These actions gave her a sense of control, however small, in an otherwise powerless situation. The most shocking detail came when she described overhearing plans to move her out of state. According to Emma, her captors had begun discussing a buyer, a transaction that would have made her rescue nearly impossible. This revelation underscored the urgency of her father's undercover efforts and the raid that ultimately saved her life. Though Emma's physical injuries were minimal, the psychological toll of her ordeal was profound. She struggled with anxiety, nightmares, and a deep mistrust of strangers. Her once bright demeanor had dimmed, replaced by a cautious and withdrawn presence. She avoided leaving the house, even to step into the yard, and jumped at sudden noises or unfamiliar voices. Therapy became an essential part of Emma's recovery. Frank and Angela worked tirelessly to provide her with a safe, supportive environment, but the process of reintegration was slow. Friends who once shared her carefree outlook found it difficult to relate to her experiences, creating a sense of isolation that only deepened her struggles. School was out of the question for months, and even family outings had to be carefully planned to avoid overwhelming her. For Frank, the hardest part was watching his daughter battle the invisible scars left by her captivity. He felt a deep guilt for not being able to protect her, and often replayed the events leading up to her disappearance in his mind, wondering what he could have done differently. Angela, too, carried the weight of her own grief, but the family found strength in each other, determined to rebuild their lives together. The arrests of Emma's captors marked the beginning of a complex legal battle. The two men apprehended during the raid, identified as Francis Buckite and Daniel Morales, faced a litany of charges, including kidnapping, human trafficking, unlawful confinement, and endangering the welfare of a child. Both had prior criminal records, which prosecutors used to argue for the harshest penalties possible. The anonymous tip that had set the rescue in motion became a focal point of the investigation. Authorities believed it had come from someone within the trafficking ring, possibly a low-level associate looking to distance themselves from the operation. While the sender's identity remained unknown, their information had been crucial in breaking the case. This case has sparked broader conversations about trafficking prevention and the need for increased vigilance in communities like Pinebrook. Local authorities have introduced new measures, including public awareness campaigns and improved surveillance systems, to prevent similar tragedies in the future. While the ordeal left scars on the Gervasi family, it also brought Frank and Emma closer than ever before. Their bond, forged in the crucible of a shared trauma, became unshakable. Frank's unwavering determination to find her had been the driving force behind her rescue, and Emma often spoke of how knowing her father wouldn't stop searching gave her hope during her darkest moments. Frank, in turn, found strength in his daughter's resilience. Watching her slowly reclaim her sense of self reminded him of why he had fought so hard to bring her home. He became her biggest advocate, ensuring she had access to the resources she needed to heal and celebrating every small victory along the way. The family's journey wasn't easy, but it was one of hope, resilience, and unbreakable love. As Emma began to rebuild her life, she and Frank often reflected on the importance of never giving up, no matter how hopeless a situation might seem. Their story, though born of tragedy, became a testament to the power of determination and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Though the scars of their ordeal remain, the Gervasi family emerged stronger, their story serving as both a warning and an inspiration to others. Despite the successful rescue and arrest, this case is far from been over as authorities sought to answer these lingering questions. Investigators continued to explore potential leads, conducting interviews with individuals who frequented the marina and analyzing financial records for evidence of trafficking transactions. They also worked with advocacy groups and nonprofits to raise awareness about human trafficking and encourage victims or witnesses to come forward. For the Gervasi family, the unanswered questions added a layer of unease to their attempts to rebuild their lives. Frank, who had been instrumental in uncovering key evidence, found himself haunted by the possibility that the operation he had infiltrated was just the tip of the iceberg. He often wondered if others like Emma were still out there, waiting for someone to save them. The lingering mysteries surrounding Emma's case served as a stark reminder of the complexities of human trafficking investigations. The story of Emma Gervasi's disappearance and rescue, while harrowing, remained incomplete. The unanswered questions left a sense of unease, but also a renewed commitment to seeking justice, not just for Emma, but for all those who might still be trapped in the shadows. For every question answered, another lingered, reminding the world that the fight against trafficking is far from over. The story of Emma Gervasi's disappearance, the harrowing details of her captivity, and the extraordinary lengths her father Frank went to for her rescue leave behind lingering questions that extend far beyond the bounds of a single case. What would you have done in Frank's place? Faced with an unbearable void, with law enforcement running out of leads, would you have taken the same risks? Would you have gone undercover, infiltrated dangerous circles, and put your life on the line to find the person you love most? Frank's actions were fueled by desperation and an unshakable belief in his daughter's survival. But not everyone would have the strength or the willingness to walk the same path. What would you have done differently? Could you have made the same sacrifices? Do you think Frank's undercover efforts were justified, despite the risks? Some might argue that Frank's decision to act outside the boundaries of law enforcement was reckless, that he could have jeopardized Emma's safety or his own life. Others see it as the ultimate act of love and bravery, the actions of a father who simply refused to give up. His success in uncovering critical information played a pivotal role in her rescue. But what if things had gone wrong? Was it a necessary gamble, or did it set a dangerous precedent for others in similar situations? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button for more stories like this. Thank you for watching.